comes into sight. And each one wants his name chiseled in stone, as they always do, these guys. A statue and his name chiseled in stone is the first king of the whole entire planet.
He's got a heart of stone. You best leave her alone.
And they're all chomping at the bit to get it. So the cooperation won't last forever. That doesn't help the masses, of course, because in the meantime they are being called off. Population control councils were held by Britain under Thomas Malthus in the 1700s. And they discussed methods of culling off the excess people through disease or creating housing schemes, basically, on swamplands and unhealthy areas. The stuff that we did to the American Indians, in other words, putting them in areas where they can't eat very well, and the climate isn't the best, and it's swampy, full of mosquitoes, whatever, and plagues break out, and they even had it worked out under Malthus that the poor houses that they created, where they threw you in when you were broke, you see, or you owed money for your rent, as most folk did. They rented in Britain, for instance, in Europe. And if you didn't have money, they'd throw you in a debtor's prison, which cost you money, by the way. That was added to what you owed. And then they kicked you out into the poorhouse, where you were forced to work till you died. And you didn't last long in the poorhouse. Most women and children lasted 6 months at the most. And this was called a more efficient way of disposing of the poor unfortunates, as they call them. This is the real history, which isn't hidden if you want to find it. It's not a nice drama, like a docudrama like TV or Anne of Green Gables. All the rubbish that they feed you, because people get most of their history today through romantic novels and stuff like that. There was nothing romantic about the 1700s, the 1800s, or the 1900s. For most people, it was a horror show. And that horror show has been slightly alleviated at the moment, because the biggest change of all is coming into view, the completion of the great work, the one that started 4,500 BC sort of stuff, where they see themselves running the world in a scientific manner. The natural order, where the stupid ones simply won't exist as they're too stupid, and there'll be no free thought or free opinion. And we see it all today with political correctness, all this kind of stuff being forced down our throats. It's actually being implemented, and unfortunately the people themselves are their own worst enemy. It's like the Matrix 1 movie, because they show you in the Matrix movie, since the elite themselves, that they'll culturally gave you those movies, you're cheering on the guy you think's the good guy, but you've got it all mixed up. You see, this is themselves, they're talking of the new man, Neo Anderson. Andra, from the Greek Andros, man, Neo. Anderson, the new son of man, the new Messiah, the Superman, all these superpowers. You see, that's where Superman comes from. It's the superpowers. That's the one that gets into the next stage. Those who can't do that will not be allowed into the next stage. And it's no coincidence, it's identical, this Freemasonry of the European elite. It's no coincidence, it's identical with Hinduistic theology, a caste system. Because in Hinduism too, at the end of ages, those who are unworthy to come into the next must perish. They mustn't be allowed into the next stage. And so we see the massive spraying in the skies, we see all the inoculations being dished out, people getting sicker. Adolescent arthritis now, inoculations, more of them. And all the propaganda on television that we're force fed through, it's always law series or hospital series and drama, and detectives and DNA swab testing and all this stuff. It's all training you, you see. It's all propaganda to make you obey these authorities, these specialists, law, medicine, and the courts, and science, DNA, and scientific techniques of finding things out, you see. It's training you to accept this as a natural order, because it's nothing like the reality. Nothing like the reality. But it's good entertainment, and it's good programming for the people towards an end they don't even think about, because they're not taught to think, you see. They're taught not to think. That's what we're educated for. The first thing you learn in school is to repeat after me. If you repeat after me, you get a little gold star. And if you're not repeating, and you're very good at repeating, the people will call you clever. That's nothing to do with being clever. That's being a good parrot. Repeating after me is a good parrot, but that's what they want, because then your quality approval stamp, square your head. You're now unnatural. You're dumb enough to get into their system. So that's the real system we live within, you see. It's quite funny, really. Tragically funny. Because they can't tell the people, we have been killing you. They can't tell them. You don't tell the children what you're doing. The poor things wouldn't understand, poor dears. They wouldn't understand, poor dears. We find the same thing with the Afrikaners in Africa. That's how they talked about the blacks. Well, you see, you can't help them, because they're children, really. They have children's mentalities, so you can't be straightforward with them. Well, that's how the elite treat all of us. To the elite, the peasantry of China is no lower than the peasantry in Europe or the Americas, because they believe in elite breeding, and the elite breeders of every country rule every country. Therefore, it's one big club. You've proven your worth to join. You're worthy, as it says in Masonry. Second generation Masons, or first generation Masons, can't get terribly high, because unless they've married an Eastern Star, and then they bring up a son. It's the offspring, it's a breeding program. You'll see it in the Rosicrucian books, where they keep tongue-in-cheek hinting for the very stupid, because it's meant to pick up the very stupid into these societies, and through almost, you know, stumbling over each other, they tell you that you know, selection is very important. Selective breeding is what they're getting at. Selective breeding. And don't let the lower head rule the upper head, is what they say to the men. And nobody understands that. That's why all this is in your language. So it's a breeding program, and a first generation Mason can't get up terribly high, maybe a 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite. But if he marries an Eastern Star, who's again been through a few generations, then the offspring can go higher, the son of a Mason, and in the third generation can go much higher still. So you're breeding upwards through selective breeding, and your wives are chosen for you at that level. Just like the nobility's wives have always been chosen for the men. What you do in your free time when you're not breeding is up to yourselves. As long as you're both kept in a good financial style, she can do what she wants, and you can do what you want. There's no love there. Love is something which is fairly new, that's been marketed to the public. Because people in the past, even in the lower orders of things, married out of necessity. Male and female. And they really didn't have a good life, either one. When the Normans came into Britain and introduced this wonderful system of lordship over the public, and all subservient to the king, you know, the head hootsman, and you have the lords and the feudal lords below them, and the sub-lords, the sirs, you know, and they all got their own patch to guard over and use. The peasantry were bought and sold with the land, and in English they like to change it to serfs. They don't like the word slavery, because we're a Christian country, you see, and we can't have that in our history books, so we call them serfs. So 90% of the public were serfs, you see, and they were bought and sold with the land, starting from the time of the Norman invasion, who brought civilization through Europe. It's this same civilization through slaughtering people, massively financially backed as well. It was many years in the making, this, and tremendous logistics in keeping them all supplied at sea and on land. It was much bigger than World War II, and cost and the whole thing, and time. So this was an ancient system coming through here, backing it heavily, and it was a must-be. They had to conquer everything and eliminate all opposition, which they did. And they were terrible rulers. They were inhumane, terribly inhumane. So the Normans came in, and they had the Domesday Book created. You see, the Domesday Book was an inventory of all that they owned, all the king owned. And that was people, livestock, houses, children, chickens, everything. It was a complete inventory of the whole land that he owned. And that was nothing new, because the ancient pharaohs had the same system in Egypt. And it was nothing new because the Normans also, a lord would put out his son to a relative, to an uncle or whatever, you see, another lord, and he would become taught the ways of knighthood through this relative. That was traditional with Normans. Well, you jump back to the pharaohs, they did the same thing, because their sons would get sent off to different satraps, they call them, little princes, their satrapies, and they'd get brought up and taught the ways of being noble and a warrior, a knight, you see. The same bunch all down through history. Same techniques: money, priesthoods, power, slaughter, armies. And the people had to produce. Now the Normans allowed the peasantry to keep maybe 40% or so, or 60% of their crops, and there was no intensive farming then. They didn't have all the high-tech yada yada do today, so crops often were terribly huge. But the Lord would take 40-odd% or even 60% of yours, and keep enough for his staff and all his armies, and sell all the rest for profit. And then profit had to split that all the way up to the king at the top, the real mafia system. This is the most organized gang on the planet, and it's a gang system, really.